En débat, sénatrice Bellemare.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors aujourd'hui, je veux vous parler du projet de loi.
Today, I'd like to talk about Bill C-32. First of all, I was rather surprised on the debate we had so far. I'm surprised, but yet not surprised, because I'd like to share with you some of my fears. But I'd first of all like to put things in their context. When I looked at Bill C-32, I thought it was very important to get it to pass, to help for students, and to help people become property owners. But when I looked at the bill, I got interested in the American bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, which came about last fall, and which contained a suite of measures to help to reduce the impact of recession on Americans, but also a suite of measures that were meant to stimulate investments in the United States through the green shift, and to help generate growth, which would lead to reducing the deficit. So this was a whole panoply of challenges.
At the same time,
En forme de crédit d'impôt et de prêt. Mais moi, j'ai vu beaucoup de crédits d'impôt plus que de prêts, mais le ministère des Finances a vu plus de prêts que de crédits d'impôt. Ça dépend comment on lit là, la législation américaine. Donc,
So this bill translation, do you want to go?
Senator Bellemare, in the bill,
The Inflation Reduction Act, there is a suite of measures in the context of a shift towards a green economy. $400 billion, unprecedented. And these measures are meant to help with this. No, the Government of Canada, if I understand correctly, following this American legislation, I think that they felt called upon to act. And in our budget, we have the Canadian Growth Fund, and when the minister came to committee, he appeared before committee, and I read the testimony at committee. They talked about the urgency of acting in order to create a fund, $15 billion, and it was in this bill in order to immediately begin investing in businesses. And it's true, this leads to a great many questions because the bill is relatively succinct and has also earmarked $2 billion for certain actions which will help investment companies make investments and help the country to make the transition. But senators had a lot of questions in committee, and Senator Marshall had very interesting questions. So did Senator Chignac, Senators Lefredo, Moncion, others. They all had questions to ask. They all wanted information. This said, we learn a little more when we look at the technical documents on the growth fund. We look at the goals targeted by these measures. I'm going to read some of this. What I'm trying to do here is suggest there are certain elements that the government might want to put in the next version of this budget. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to ask the government to see these things put into the next iteration of the bill. Given that the economic prosperity of Canada is based on natural resources and other industries which make a lot of emissions, we want the country to be able to attain its climate objectives and ensure prosperity for Canadians. Canada must create the technologies, infrastructures, and businesses necessary to reduce its dependence on carbon. It won't be able to do this without increasing growth quickly and investing in the private sector in ways that will help Canada's position as a leader in low-carbon technology.
And it continues. The fund was designed to reduce risks that currently limit capital investment, and it will unlock domestic and foreign capital that Canada needs now. Those are the objectives of this Canada Growth Fund, this transition then, and the scale is fairly broad. We also learn that there is a particular urgency to act, and when you read the newspapers, you can learn that there are businesses who have started to invest in the U.S., for example, without any penalties. This fund then, and this is the way I interpret, is designed to defend Canada's strategy and to say to businesses, we will help you with technologies, especially high-risk sectors. Of course, the argument as such may not be convincing, but the technical documents allow us to understand the size and the complexity of the problem. We learn, for example, in these technical documents, exactly what risks the Canada Growth Fund will mitigate. And these are major risks. First of all, there are risks related to demand, given that there's uncertainty around end market demand and pricing. There's the risk related to policies because of perceived uncertainty around climate regulations such as a carbon price or clean fuel standards. There are regulatory risks, major ones, that's important, with respect to project assessments and permitting approvals for constructing projects, and execution risk from building first-of-a-kind commercialized products and companies. Now, of course, this is all jargon to say that our businesses are facing major risks, and the government, with this growth fund, wants to provide financial instruments that will not only provide a return on investment, but reduce risks for businesses. That's what the government wants to do then. But for the time being, the bill does not say much except in the technical documents. I believe the government should have had results-based targets with clear greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. The results-based targets and the criteria actually are found in the technical document in the backgrounder. They're on the last page. The first objective is to quickly and significantly reduce emissions and contribute to achieving Canada's climate targets. There are other objectives. it would have been useful to have parameters, for example, reduction of annual greenhouse gas emissions enabled by the fund investments in projects and fund investments, the growth fund investments in companies. However, I think we need to give the government a chance and wait until the next bill is tabled and then say to the government what we would like to see it in this bill. In this bill, we would like to say three things. First of all, targets based on results. Also, a governance structure that is much broader than what is provided for and as described in committee. In the committee, it was said that there would be expert governance by financial experts that would have the best instruments to reduce investment risks for businesses. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that's enough. And in fact, there were witnesses that provided very interesting example. Mr. Jim McGowan, for example, who is the CEO of the or president of the Alberta Work Corporation. He's a unionist, and he says you should skate to where the puck is going. This is the Alberta Labor Federation, rather. And in its report, the Federation provides for an industrial strategy, and Mr. McGowan said that there is currently a lack of vision for the growth fund. He thinks that the government should have a vision. He says there should be a bicameral or bi-chamber management of the fund, and I will read it for you. It's clear in English.
Clerk, so I would encourage you to take a look at the 7 pathways we defined dans le rapport. And the one thing about the growth fund that I want to emphasize, and I mentioned it in passing in my opening remarks, has to do with governance. We are suggesting that instead of simply creating an arm's-length organization that is run by investment managers, that we have a bicameral structure where we have a stakeholder board at the top that would help provide direction, and then an operational board that would handle investment. We actually have a bicameral structure like that for our big pension plans in Alberta. I acted of the chair of what we call the sponsor board. I acted as the chair of what we call the sponsor board to set general policy, and then we had an operation board. Alors,
So it suggested that the government, in its next version of the bill or of the proposal, that the government ensure that there is a more macroeconomic transition rather than a very specialized one. The other comment that I would like to make, inspired by all of this, comes... Well, I'm drawing on the Quebec experience. The Quebec has a green fund and has something that resembles a bicameral structure and specific targets. However, it's taking time to have a clear structure. It's very, very complex. And what I think that Canada is missing to be able to carry out this transition, a necessary one, I should add, we have funds, we know what we need to do, but there's no consultation, no collaboration between all the different players. Every single government wants to do what the government in power decides. And in my opinion, the problem, the macroeconomic situation requires not just that a fund be set up, but that there be a Canadian prosperity board or council where the federal government, the provinces, and representatives of the economy, that would be labor and business, take part. With such a council, we could provide the necessary vision to spend the funds we have, not only in that we'll have in the federal government, but in Quebec and so on. That is what I would like to see. Results targets, a board, and a prosperity council.